The Illini are on the road for the first time in 2014. We're right here to get you ready for kickoff against Washington. Inside the Illini, Big Ten football starts now.
Inside the Illini, Big Ten college football is brought to you by Illini HQ, the News Gazette, News Talk 1400 WDWS and WAND.
Well, it's 2-0 versus 2-0, and the similarities between undefeated Washington and Illinois are very eerie. We'll get to those later in the show. But first, we have to start about a big news week. I'm here with Steve Kelly of Sports Talk 1400, Matt Daniels, Champaign News Gazette beat writer for Illinois football. One of those big topics was Penn State football. A few changes, one of them being they're eligible for the postseason now. Steve, what did you think when that news came down?
I was a little bit surprised at the timing of it. I think overall I'm glad for those young guys. They weren't really involved in all that stuff, and so they can qualify for the Big Ten title game if they can win some games. But more importantly and more realistically, they have a shot at a bowl game, and next year they'll be back at full scholarship levels.
Any surprise for you, Matt? Or
a little bit of surprise. I talked to Tim Beckman about it after practice earlier this week, and he kind of didn't really say anything controversial or anything. He said it's a good decision for the kids that are there, and college football is about all the experiences that student athletes can get. And when Penn State comes to Champaign in mid-November, late November now, they'll have a lot to play for with a possible bowl bid on the line for them. And it's another way to help James Franklin kind of reinvigorate the program, especially with getting the scholarships back in store for next season.
I think that'll make it interesting when they play their first Big Ten game this week. They go on the road and play Rutgers. We're picking that game later, and I may have been leaning Rutgers with the way they've been playing, but this is one of those weeks where it feels like Penn State's going to be a little reinvigorated. Let's talk about the other. Penn State had a good day, but the Big Ten didn't have a very good week. Steve, you're watching the games unfold. We obviously get done covering the Illini early afternoon. What did you think of the Big Ten last week?
I was amazed, actually. I went home and I thought, I started to watch the games play out. I was watching Ohio State, watching Michigan State, and I thought, is this New Year's Day? It felt like a bunch of bowl games with the Big Ten history there. So, yeah, I was really surprised by it, as evidenced in some of our picks that we'll talk about a little bit later on as well. But not a good day. They went 8-5 on the day with the big name guys, so to speak, among those 5 losses.
Yeah, Michigan State, Ohio State. I guess we'd be surprised by the outcomes and some of the point differentials. What do you think about the weekend, Matt?
It was surprising, and I think it shows the lack of elite quarterbacks in the Big Ten right now. Wes Lunt and Christian Hackenberg, I think, really helped their case with their performances so far, and J.T. Barrett at Ohio State still has some things he needs to work out, and Devin Gardner's inconsistency issues that have flared up again. And I wasn't too surprised about Oregon beating Michigan State. I really like the Ducks offense, and trying to stop them out in Eugene is very troublesome for a lot of people like Mark D'Antonio and the Spartans found out. And we'll just have to wait and see if the Big Ten can have a team that makes its way into Final Four talk later this season at all.
I think that's a big question, and the national analysts I've seen talk say, what would make that happen? A miracle, an act of God, things that would be out of the Big Ten's control. They probably would need a lot of things to happen. We have 2 segments on the Big Ten, so we'll talk about that at length. The Illini, technically, they got a better shot at the college football playoff right now, right? Undefeated?
Sure.
Hey, optimism here. I know a week ago on this show, we were talking about this high-powered Western Kentucky offense coming to Champaign. There weren't 59 points or 702 yards from one side, but there was some predictable tension. We'll go through the game quarter by quarter as Inside the Illini Big Ten football continues after the break.
Inside the Illini, Big Ten college football is brought to you by Illini HQ, the News Gazette, News Talk 1400 WDWS and WAND.
We figured it would be an offensive showcase. We didn't expect a clinic on turnovers, but ultimately we got plenty of both as the Illini hosted Western Kentucky.
59 points, 702 yards, and 97 plays. Those numbers rung in the ears of Illinois fans. The Western Kentucky Hilltoppers could seemingly get up and down the field at will in Week 1, and it didn't look a whole lot different early in Week 2. It was Illinois who struck first, driving deep into WKU territory and capping it off with Josh Ferguson's leap for a touchdown. The Illini threw the first punch, but the Toppers then landed a combination. Stopping the Illini on the goal line, they took it 99 yards in 18 plays to take a 10-3 lead. 7 minutes later, Brandon Dowdy hit big tight end Tyler Higbee, and Western Kentucky had put up 17 unanswered. The Illini weren't just behind, they were now trailing by 10. It took every ounce of effort and a recovery of their own fumble to get the Illini within 3 at the half.
It's 4th and inches. We're gonna run the football. We're gonna go for it, and we're gonna get it. And we didn't get it today. So there's, that's not the type of team they want to be.
Slow starts out of the locker room weren't an issue for a change. Wes Lunt led a 65-yard drive, completing a touchdown pass to Martez Barr for the second time in as many weeks. Illinois was back out in front.
I felt really good. Receivers were doing a great job running routes, and the line was doing a heck of a job protecting.
It looked like they were poised to put it away in the third. Driving again, Lunt completed a pass to Malik Turner at the WKU 5. But Turner was pickpocketed. Wonderful Terry. Great name, and the name of a guy running in the other direction for 95 yards, officially labeled a completion and a fumble. For the second week in a row, Illinois trailed heading into the fourth quarter. But also for the second week in a row, Lunt was surgical with the passing game in the fourth, carving the Toppers defense to the tune of 10 of 11 passing for 154 yards in the final period. His connection with Justin Hardy, who broke free for a 62-yard score, put the Illini ahead.
Middle of the field was open. Caught it, just took it up and just had to show. People were surprised about how fast I was. I always knew, but I finally got to show it.
And this was the dagger. Illinois sophomore Taylor Barton, for a team criticized for its inability to create turnovers, got a big one in a big moment. Barton stepped in front of a Dowdy pass and had nothing but real estate in front of him. 77 yards with the interception return. The first pick six for the Illini in 2 years.
Turnovers is huge. We didn't have a bunch last year like we wanted. That's why we're something we emphasize every day. So, the more turnovers we give the defense, the better it's going to be.
The boys in orange once again escape. Head coach Tim Beckman repeating his Week 1 line, a W is a W.
We're going to learn from it, and we're going to continue to make this program better.
And something we didn't know we'd say so early in the season, turnovers really leading Illinois to a win. I guess in terms of, put aside what we saw maybe in the third quarter there, it was refreshing to see some of that late in the game.
Well, it's 3 turnovers and an interception.
Right.
Only saw 3 of those all last season, and as you mentioned, first pick six in a couple of years, and that was nice to see that, and they got the ball on the ground a couple of times as well.
And Tim Banks, the defensive coordinator for Illinois, I think has grown weary of getting questions from the media about when are the turnovers going to come, and he didn't have to answer those after last Saturday's win. They came in full supply, and a few more today against Washington would definitely be good for the Illini.
And Wes Lunt, we have to talk about him once again in the fourth quarter. He's just nails. 10 of 11, 154 yards, threw for the touchdown. His fourth quarter passer rating for the season, those 2 games, is 264. That efficiency rating is just off the charts. And if you think about it, 2 quarters, it's half a game. He has 309 yards in a half a game in those fourth quarters. Why is he so different in the fourth quarter?
I don't know. Maybe he doesn't know either,
Yeah.
but I was talking to him this week about that, and good news, bad news. You can come back and come from behind to win these games. It'd be nice to not have to do that sometime.
Right.
So I don't know when that's going to happen, but he's really money on the line down the stretch.
Maybe it's the Rochester genes. They just see he didn't get challenged enough in high school, so fourth quarter maybe he feels like stepping up at Illinois. But I asked Bill Cubit earlier this week if he's a better coach in the fourth quarter, and that's why. And he said no. And Wes just kind of makes plays when they need to. And so far, how Illinois goes is really dependent on Wes Lunt's right arm.
I'm really interested to see where Lunt's growth as the season goes on. meets his regression in the Big Ten season, where that will meet in the middle. I'm very interested to see, because right now he is on pace to really shatter some Illinois and Big Ten records. We'll be watching that throughout the year. It's a little early for me to get too excited about that. Also, the defense, we talked about the turnovers. They did manage to hold Western Kentucky to 400 yards, which is a small victory for a team that had 700 yards the week before. Improvements on defense, Steve?
I think a little bit on the defensive line, although I think it needs more.
Yeah.
They need to get a little more penetration, more rush. It all starts on the line there. And when you look at Washington, which we'll do a little bit later on, their offensive line is huge. They look like a Wisconsin offensive line. They've got a couple of guys on their defensive line on the other side that are tough as well. They got a nose tackle that leads the nation in sacks, which is a little bit unusual. But I thought the defensive line for Illinois was a little better, taking baby steps perhaps.
Yeah, I still like to see the linebackers really step up and have a good game. Too many missed tackles against Western Kentucky. Ernest Thomas has played well early, coming out on some blitzes in the first 2 games, but the missed tackles are, I think, still what kind of concerns me. And Washington exposed Illinois in that area last year, and they may do so later today as well.
One of the other areas of concern was special teams, a couple of missed field goals, and we saw the 3rd time in 2 games this season that the kickoff has gone out of bounds. Just a few of those mistakes that Illinois needs to clean up, those things, little things that could cost them in the end. In terms of the big picture as a whole, it was put up or shut up week in the Big Ten, so I guess that kind of means shut up. Is that what we're saying here? Over the next 2 segments, we go from west to east. Can the Big Ten repair the damage over the next 12 weeks? We'll discuss next.
The Inside the Illini weekly MVP singles out the top performer at the previous week's Illinois game, and at the risk of getting repetitive, Illinois quarterback Wes Lunt takes it again. The sophomore threw for 456 yards, second most in Memorial Stadium history. He also added 3 touchdowns to his Illinois resume. He's boasting a 4th quarter efficiency rating of 264 in his first 2 games at Illinois. And here's what's interesting. He says they're not clicking yet.
We can be as good as we want to be, and I think we hold ourselves to a high standard.
2 weeks into last season, the Big Ten had 3 total losses. 2 weeks into this season, the conference has 7, including a few from conference favorites. WA&D's Eric Harold fills us in on the highlights, starting in the West.
In the West, number 19, Nebraska, taking on McNeese State. Not a big-name team, but they gave the Cornhuskers some trouble in this game, as they actually led in the first quarter, but Jordan Westerkamp gets a long touchdown reception that ties it up. Nebraska and McNeese would go at it, though. It'd be tied up in the 4th quarter with under a minute left. Amir Abdullah takes a short pass, breaks 1 tackle, breaks 2, breaks 3, breaks 4, breaks 5, maybe a 6th one, and he finally gets into the open field, and game over as Nebraska survives a tough game against McNeese State, 31-24. Number 18, Wisconsin, taking on Western Illinois. Things would not go well for the Leathernecks. As the ball gets out of the end zone, he tries to take a knee. You cannot do that. That's a safety. No time off the clock, and they're already down 2. Things would be pretty easy for Wisconsin in this game as Tanner McAvoy completes a pass short, puts him up 16-3. The points would come easy, and they win against Western Illinois 37-3. Iowa against Ball State. Iowa trailed 10 points in the 4th quarter until Jake Rudock throws it, gets a touchdown, brings them to within 3. They would still need more to complete the comeback, and they would get it from Jake Doozy, catching the pass and taking it into the end zone. Iowa, with a thrilling comeback win over Ball State, they win 17-13. Northwestern taking on Northern Illinois. The highlight of the day was Paris Logan making this one-handed interception in the end zone. Northwestern falls to Northern Illinois 23-15. Northwestern at 0-2, already having a pretty rough season. Elsewhere in the West, Minnesota takes out Middle Tennessee 35-24, and Purdue gets clobbered by Central Michigan 38-17. And now we return to the Inside the Illini crew.
All the big topics, of course, in the East in terms of those big losses and those big games. But let's start with the West. And talking about Nebraska, they didn't have a great showing either, despite the fact that they won a 7-point win against McNeese State. Thank goodness for Amir Abdullah, huh?
That game was headed for overtime until he took over and turned a short pass into a long game-winning touchdown play. And, yeah, that was one of those games. It was a head scratcher, and it was only a sign of what was yet to come for the day in the Big Ten.
Yeah, that's inexcusable for a Nebraska team that really destroyed Florida Atlantic in Week 1 to only beat an FCS opponent by 7 points. I don't think the folks in Lincoln are too happy with Bo Pelini going into this Saturday, but they're still 2-0.
The annual Pelini ritual out there on Lincoln. They always seem to be upset with him at some point. I thought Tommy Armstrong Jr., it's funny looking at the statistics. His completion numbers weren't great, but he threw for 242 yards. He ran for 131. It looked like offensively they were putting up the numbers. What was going wrong?
I don't know. I didn't get a chance to see much of the game or see much about it afterwards, but obviously not putting it in the end zone.
Right.
They got away with that W, as you said. A W is a W, or Tim Beckman
W.
said. W. And they got one out there, but it wasn't pretty, that's for sure.
Nobody really had a good week. Let's talk about Iowa. We've talked about the Illinois game, and they obviously had some struggles with WKU, but Iowa was trailing by 10 going into the fourth quarter in their game against Ball State. Hawkeyes have any concerns out there?
Oh yeah, I mean they almost as my voice elevates to the sound of a teenager.
That was emphatic.
Yeah, exactly. They almost lost to Northern Iowa in Week 1, and Ball State was up by 10 late in the fourth quarter. And Kirk Ferentz obviously took them to a bowl game last year after a disappointing 2012 season, but there's a lot of reason for concern in Iowa City, I'd say.
So they almost lost in Week 1. They should have lost in Week 2. So they came back and won that game. A lot of folks still think that Iowa comes to Champaign-Urbana later in the season undefeated. They're going to have to improve or look a little better than they have so far.
Yeah, the way the conference is shaken out, I mean, you can't really find a favorite. Wisconsin probably would still be the favorite. They play Western Illinois, and they did what Wisconsin should do to Western Illinois. Do you think the Badgers are the runaway favorite at this point?
I don't think so until they settle on their quarterback issues. They've got the best running back in the West in Melvin Gordon, and he's still trying to find his way at times, and they got Corey Clement as well, kind of a 1-2 punch there. But until the quarterback issues kind of get resolved between Tanner McAvoy and Joel Stave, the Badgers aren't that elite team, I don't think, in the Big Ten.
I don't think there's a runaway favorite on either side of the Big Ten, the East or the West. Is that good? Maybe. I don't know. We'll see.
Well, and of course, Purdue, I mentioned last week that they could double their win total from last year. They didn't even come close to doing that against Central Michigan. And then Northwestern starting out 0-2. That leaves the lone unbeatens, Nebraska, Iowa, Illinois, and Minnesota in the West. It'll be interesting to see how those teams fare as the season goes on, speaking specifically of Nebraska and Iowa, a couple of the contenders there. Well, no offense to the West, but the news was all about the East last week. Ohio State, Michigan, Michigan State, huge opportunities and huge disappointments. What it means for the Big Ten for the rest of the year next on Inside the Illini, Big Ten football.
It's time for the Inside the Illini Play of the Week, brought to you by the Decatur Athletic Club. Such a big play. One, because the Illini just haven't had many, and two, it came at a pivotal moment in the game. With Western Kentucky driving, the Illinois defense came up big, and it was safety Taylor Barton. Big plays in the first 2 games of his sophomore year, but none bigger than this, a 77-yard interception return for a touchdown. Barton would go in untouched as Illinois went ahead by 2 scores and cruised to victory.
As a defense, I think we're a closer-knit group, so when things happen, negative things like that, we pick ourselves up and we get ready to go.
Ohio State, Virginia Tech, Michigan, Notre Dame, and the oh-so-important Michigan State, Oregon. The non-conference slate couldn't be beat, but the Big Ten apparently could. We go back to Eric Harold for the highlights.
We start out in the East with Michigan taking on Notre Dame. This yearly series coming to an end. Michigan hoping to win the final game of this series, but Notre Dame had other plans. Everett Golston launches it up for William Fuller. He makes a spectacular catch on the ball. 21-0 Notre Dame at that point, and they would end up blowing out the Wolverines 31-0. Meanwhile, in Oregon, we have a matchup between 2 top 10 teams. Big national championship implications, and wait, that's some crazy hair. And it was a crazy game for Marcus Mariota as he drops back, throws it down the middle to Devin Allen. Allen is going to go down. No, he's not. He keeps on his feet, and he gets into the end zone. 18-7 Oregon at that point. They take care of business against the Spartans, 46-27. Virginia Tech, Ohio State, a game a lot of people had on their upset watch, and Virginia Tech would deliver as Michael Brewer throws left side for Bucky Hodges. 10-yard grab gives them a 28-21 lead in the fourth quarter, and they pull off the upset against the Buckeyes, 35-21. Penn State hosting the Zips of Akron. This one was a slobber knocker most of the way through, but in the fourth quarter, Christian Hackenberg throws 44 yards to Jesse James to open it up, gives them a late lead, and they win this one 21-3. We finish up with Rutgers taking on Howard. Howard would lead this thing early, 7-3, but Paul James gets a pass from Gary Nova, gets up the sideline, and no one is going to catch him. Gives Rutgers a 10-7 lead, and they would end up taking care of business against Howard. Final score, 38-25. Finishing out the East, Maryland takes out South Florida 24-17, and Indiana not in action as they have the week off. And now we return to the Inside the Illini crew.
I want to start this discussion with Michigan State, a team that hadn't given up more than 28 points since the 2012 Outback Bowl in a triple overtime game against Georgia. Oregon is in a class of their own in terms of offense, but Michigan State has been in a class of their own in terms of defense for a long time. What happened in this ball game?
Well, the second half happened.
Yeah, the second quarter looked okay for Michigan State.
The first half wasn't bad. I think they got a little tired of seeing that color right there, because you didn't have a hard time finding Oregon on the field, no doubt. But getting outscored 28-3 in the second half, and the last 28 points of the game, actually, they just made it look easier than it was. But Oregon looked awful good, man.
Yeah, they did, and Michigan State's defense looked awfully bad in the second half. It had a chance for a signature win, and really to elevate Michigan State kind of further up in the Big Ten, launching point. And for whatever reason, Michigan State didn't come to play in the second half, and really, hurts their reputation, hurts their chance to make a dent in the postseason play this year if they want to go to that coveted national semifinal spot that 4 teams are vying for. And just not a good afternoon out at Autzen Stadium for Michigan State.
I know Autzen is loud. I know it's a tough place to play, but I also know that Oregon is for real this year. And of course, they move up to number 2 in the rankings right now. I guess top 4 is all that matters at this point for teams that want to contend for the national title. But Michigan State will have some ground to make up at this point, as will Ohio State. More than a little surprising, falling to Virginia Tech. J.T. Barrett, 9 of 29 passing, 3 interceptions and a touchdown. It looks like he was exposed a little bit by a good team. He
was, and they made a nice comeback and got back in the ball game, and then fell again in the fourth quarter. I've been watching Ohio State football for 50 years. They can always run the ball. They can't run the ball.
That's a concern.
At least so far. And J.T. Barrett with a new guy, you need to be able to run the ball, and they haven't been able to do that. And will they get that done? We'll see.
Yeah, and Illinois hasn't been able to run the ball consistently its first 2 games, but they've got a quarterback named Westland who can throw for probably 1,000 yards a game if he really wanted to, and Barrett can't do that right now. And like you said, 1,000 yards a game, why not? I know Bill Kiewit always wants to up the standard each week, so we'll just go out and put a preposterous number out there. Like you said, the run game, that's the real downfall, I think, for Ohio State, especially because so much was predicated on Braxton Miller and his ability in the zone read. And Barrett has that capability as well, but not kind of that explosiveness that Miller had. And Ezekiel Elliott really hasn't, shined his first 2 weeks and tried to fill that void that Carlos Hyde had last season. So I think right now folks in Columbus are just hoping they can get to a bowl game on New Year's Day, because it's not looking too good right now.
And speaking of run games, 7 days after I say, I really like what Michigan did with their run game. They didn't do anything well. They ran for 100 yards. Devin Gardner, no touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Statistically, it was bad. Score-wise, it was bad. Michigan, Notre Dame. My favorite, this is tweet of the week from Ben Ford. I don't know who you are, Ben. Notre Dame announces it would like to continue series with Michigan starting next week, if possible. Notre Dame dominated that game.
They did, and that's the last one that's scheduled for a while, although I did see the Notre Dame scheduled a couple of home games with Ohio State a little bit later on. They're probably looking forward to that right now, but I didn't. And I still don't know if Notre Dame is that good, if Michigan's that bad, or it's somewhere in between.
Yeah, Brady Hoke has not exactly enamored fans in Ann Arbor the last few seasons, and a lot of times people use the instability for Illinois and the coaching staff against them on the recruiting front, and the same might start to pop up for Michigan if Hoke can't really turn that program back into a perennial winner instead of kind of a middling Big Ten team, which they certainly look like Saturday night in South Bend.
All right, in one word, does a Big Ten team make the college football playoff?
No.
Nope.
I say no as well. Hopefully we're proven wrong. We all root for the Big Ten around here.
It's too bad we got to say that going into week number 3, right?
That shows you how things are going. They're not going to make up a whole lot of ground playing each other, so it's kind of ruined already. Next on the show, our player spotlight in a guy who had more receiving yards on Saturday than he did all of last season. But there's so much more to Justin Hardy than football. We'll explain next.
Inside the Illini, Big Ten College Football is brought to you by Illini HQ, the News Gazette, News Talk 1400 WDWS, and WAND.
Well, he's one of those players we often mention in passing. After contributing as a freshman, Justin Hardy's contributions dropped off as a sophomore, but lost in all the talk about a couple new freshmen and a new junior college player or two. Was the receiving corps one of their most experienced players? Our Sarah Bush Lincoln Health System Player Spotlight focuses on Hardy.
Like his high school teammate Vangelo Bentley, Justin Hardy was originally recruited as a defensive back, but shortly after arriving at Illinois, he was thrown a curveball.
But because of numbers, we had to make him a wide receiver.
Came into college wanting to play defensive back, but talking to my high school coach, and he was just saying that it's going to be all right.
At first, the Cleveland, Ohio native admits having to switch positions was a disappointment.
It was, but I just wanted to stay positive. One thing that I really couldn't complain about is that I love making plays. I love being the show.
For the most part, Hardy played a supporting role his first 2 seasons, but last Saturday, he was the star. Down 6 points in the fourth quarter, the self-proclaimed workaholic caught a pass across the middle, broke a tackle, and that was all she wrote.
I was in the lane, I was moving. I pretty much knew I was going to score just because I know one thing God blessed me with was speed.
From the outside looking in, this was the game-changing play. But for Hardy, it was much more.
I wanted to celebrate with my team. Of course I did after I did it, but I just wanted to point to her and show her that it was all for her.
All for his mother, Estella, who passed away last December.
That was my best friend. I could say that she really didn't know how football went, but she only watched it because of me. She recorded every game so that she could watch it just to see her son out there on the field, whether it was one play or 100, she was just happy.
And even though she wasn't there Saturday, Hardy could feel her presence when he took the field for what turned out to be the biggest game of his career.
Pre-warm-ups, I went up to Coach Cube and I whispered in his ear, our angels are watching over us today. And that was true because we got the W and that was the main thing.
Let's first of all talk about Hardy's game on Saturday. 6 catches for 110 and that long touchdown. You like what you see from Justin in terms of being a receiver?
I do, and he was one of the most experienced, and that's probably overstating it a bit because they didn't have many experienced receivers back. And you saw him earlier talk about his speed. I was talking to him a little bit after the game about that, and he kind of enjoyed that question. Tell me about your speed. I think he probably was going to tell me that anyway, but he said, yeah, he's got a little burst, and he saw that field open up. And Wes Lunt told me after he threw the pass, he saw the open field and knew that Hardy was going to score. Nice kid, very respectful kid. Yes, sir, yes, ma'am on his responses to questions, but it was good to see him have a good game like that.
Yeah, and like you said, good kid. He's going to graduate in December after only 5 semesters at Illinois because he came into Illinois with a bunch of college credit already from his high school in Cleveland, and he ran track in high school as well. Was on kind of the sprint relay team, so his speed, that's why he kind of gets a good chuckle out of that. And his route running and just his maturity have really enabled him to be a more prominent role on the offense this year. I know Mike Bellamy, the Illinois wide receivers coach, has challenged him numerous times this offseason to really embrace that role of being a leader. And Hardy, it's taken him a while to kind of grasp that, but you saw what he can do on the field like he did last Saturday against the Hilltoppers.
And Matt, we're starting to learn a little bit more about him as the season goes on, and obviously the more he produces, we'll learn more. But his family life and kind of what he's gone through to get where he is. You wrote about that in the spring.
Yeah, I wrote about it in the spring. He lost his mom in December. Estella Perryman, who was incredibly close with Justin, died after a lung ailment had plagued her for a number of years, and Hardy was able to go back to Cleveland and be with his mom in her final moments, and it happened right around the time finals was going on at the end of the first semester for Illinois, and he was able to take all his finals as well as he was shuttling kind of back and forth between Champaign-Urbana and Cleveland, and he doesn't shy away from the topic. He embraces it, and everything he does essentially is in honor of his mother, and so he's playing with a lot more motivation this year because he knows someone's kind of looking down on and watching and keeping watch over him.
And I know that his relationship with Bill Cubitt hasn't always been the cleanest one, but it seems like there's this mutual respect and there is this bond that they have at this point.
Yeah, it's been a little bit up and down, but as you mentioned, respect is a key word there. Most people know, or maybe they don't, but he came as a defensive back, right. And now he's a wide receiver trying to fill a need that they had there. And he's been up and down with Bill Cubitt, but they seem to be on the same page right at the moment anyway.
Well, I imagine we'll see a lot of him with Wes Lunt throwing the ball the way he is, and if Hardy can be one of those guys that is able to get going, that's going to be huge to have all sorts of weapons. We know about the young guys that are doing well, and then there's the Martez Bars, Geronimo Allisons. He could be a key part of a really fun offense for this season. Well, the Kim Dameron era at Eastern Illinois is off to an 0-2 start, not the way the defending OVC champs drew it up. Next, we go inside the Panthers with Eastern Illinois University.
Inside the Illini, Big Ten College Football is brought to you by Illini HQ, the News Gazette, News Talk 1400 WDWS, and WAND.
Admittedly, the schedule wasn't easy off the top. Eastern opened on the road against Minnesota, then an in-state rival and fellow top 25 FCS team, Southern Illinois, as the Panthers try to get their season back on the rails. We get another report from EIU.
In-state rivals met last Saturday in Charleston as the Salukis of Southern Illinois were in town to take on the Panthers of Eastern Illinois. Anthony Standifer's interception late in the first quarter set up EIU's first score. SIU regained the lead midway through the second quarter. EIU's 2 QB attack of Jalen Whitlow and Andrew Manley led the Panthers to 2 late scores to give EIU a 21-14 halftime lead.
Whitlow goes to the shotgun with Duncan on his left. They'll hand it to Duncan up the middle, and he's over for the touchdown for Eastern Illinois. Good opening, and Taylor Duncan rambled home to make it 14-13. Back to pass Manley. Has time, throws the middle, caught by Drake, 45-50, splits the defense, 40, 35 to the 33. Manley in the shotgun, ball to the left hash mark. Shepard Little in the backfield. Here's the snap. Manley's back, looking to the right. Now he's going to run with it. Gets out of the pocket to the left at the 5. He'll go over. Touchdown, Eastern Illinois.
The second half would not be kind to the home team as SIU dominated the third quarter, outscoring EIU 17-0 and blanking the Panthers in the entire second half as EIU starts the season 0-2.
Good on third down in the first half. Didn't hardly pick up any in the second half. There was no secret that the ball was going, on third down to number 4, and we continued to let him catch the ball and make first downs on third down. And we just got to play smarter. We got to do a better job, and that starts with me.
Still looking for win number 1 on the season, EIU will battle another longtime in-state rival as the Panthers head to Normal today to battle Illinois State in the 103rd edition of the Mid-America Classic.
They're going to be ready to play. They're an explosive, well-coached football team. They're very athletic. They can run really all over the place, and they've got some exciting players. They've got a quarterback that's a heck of a player, and they put up a bunch of points last week, in Mississippi Valley, and defensively, they're going to be well coached. They're going to be athletic, and they've got a pass rusher that's as twitchy a guy as we've seen in a while.
EIU's last win at ISU came in 2008. The Panthers and Redbirds meet today at 12 noon from Hancock Stadium in Normal. The game can be viewed on CSN Chicago. Reporting on the Eastern Illinois Panthers for Inside the Illini, I'm Brad Kupiec of WEIU.
Thanks to Eastern for that report. They'll play Illinois State at noon. Up next, we'll make our college football picks and go over week 1 of the NFL season. Where did some former Illini figure in the mix? That's next on Inside the Illini, Big Ten Football.
Inside the Illini, Big Ten College Football is brought to you by Illini HQ, the News Gazette, News Talk 1400 WDWS, and WAND.
Welcome back. Time now for our weekly pick-em. Each week we're going to pick our favorite games and give you some winners, and I hope you didn't put any money down on what we said last week because we did not do very well. We'll take a look at the standings as Matt and I are 1-3 for the season. Steve's sitting there at 0-4. How do you feel about those picks last week? I know we had the Big Ten game, Michigan, Notre Dame, and things didn't go so well.
I'd like to make a prediction that I will not go 0 for the season. I'm going to get one right one of these days, maybe this week. But I didn't feel very good about my picks. You know how I felt about the Michigan-Notre Dame game. I didn't like either one of them. So I went with the Big Ten. Wrong. Stanford, I thought, would win that ball game. They played a decent game but lost, and I don't know what's going on with Texas.
So basically anything we say today, just the opposite's going to happen.
Well, there you go.
Well, I did some projections over your standings. Over the course of a season,
thank you.
You will win 0. So we'll see how that goes. Let's pick some games right now. The big one in the SEC, Georgia, number 24, South Carolina. Steve.
I'm going to go with Georgia. I like the Bulldogs in that game, even on the road.
I'll stick with Steve and go with Georgia. I'm going to say Todd Gurley increases his Heisman campaign again today.
Well, last time all three of us agreed on something, we all got it wrong. So I'm going to pick Georgia. They just look so good early in the season. They may be the SEC favorite. They're playing as well as anybody in the country right now. Second game, West Virginia at Maryland. Here's a Big Ten team. What do you guys think of this one?
We might have some disagreement on this. I don't know for sure, but I'm going to go with the Big Ten at home and Maryland in that contest.
Well, at least one of us is going to get a pick right. I'm going with West Virginia. I like what they did against Alabama. I think they're going to take the Terps down today.
Same reason as you. West Virginia Mountaineers played well against Alabama. I think they're also still one of the SEC favorites, but I'm going to take West Virginia in this one. Our last game, one I thought was really interesting, and I picked this game before we found out Penn State's postseason was getting reinstated. Penn State at Rutgers. Big game for Rutgers. First game as a Big Ten, first conference game as a Big Ten member coming early in the season. I like Penn State, though, on the road. That game's going to be sold out at Rutgers. They've got a lot of motivation, but as you mentioned, so does Penn State now.
Penn State, Christian Hackenberg throws for 500 yards. Easy win for the Nittany
Not 1,000?
Lions. Not 1,000. Not on Westland's level yet.
Nittany Lions can say all they want about how the last couple of years has been the same as before, but now that the postseason's here and they do have a shot at making that Big Ten championship game, I got to go with the Nittany Lions.
So Rutgers is going to win now.
Yeah, of course. Don't base any of your financial decisions on what you see here. We'll update the standings coming up next week. Well, a full set of games, of Week 1 games, saw a number of former Illini on active NFL rosters. Find out how they fared in a new edition of Illini in the Pros.
You won't see any Illinois rookies making highlight reels just yet, but a pair that didn't survive cuts will still suit up. Colts receiver Ryan Langford and Cardinals linebacker Jonathan Brown both made their respective practice squads. As promised, Saints' Pierre Thomas saw his role expand. The running back carried for 31 yards, but also caught 6 passes for 58 in an exciting overtime game against Atlanta.
Falcons win!
Kansas City Chiefs receiver A.J. Jenkins only played 7 offensive snaps in a loss to the Titans. After a promising preseason showing, a Kansas City Star postgame report called it disappointing. And just to illustrate how quickly things change in the NFL, a week ago in this very segment, we mentioned how Texans linebacker Whitney Mercilus lost his starting job to #1 overall pick Jadeveon Clowney. Clowney tore his meniscus against the Redskins.
Clowney is walking off.
Out 4 to 6 weeks, and Mercilus, who had 2 QB hits last Sunday, is the next man up. At the time you're watching this, the Illini are suiting up and warming up at Husky Stadium in Seattle. A rematch of the game we saw in Chicago a year ago this weekend. We'll analyze those Washington Huskies, talk about what the Illini need to do, and talk about the similarities between their undefeated starts. Next.
Inside the Illini, Big Ten College Football is brought to you by Illini HQ, the News Gazette, News Talk 1400 WDWS and WAND.
Let's play a little name game. Tell me which of these teams I'm talking about. They struggled to a win over an FCS team. They grabbed a one-score win over a non-Power 5 school. Their starting QB had a huge game in week 2, but there are concerns over their defense. Trick question, because that describes both the Illini and Huskies. It's made us rethink what we thought we knew about the matchup.
Illinois and Washington. We just saw this a year ago, but not a whole lot looks familiar, starting with Washington's head coach. Chris Peterson, a coach that managed to shock the football world at Boise State,
And it's lateral at the 30.
began his debut at a Power 5 school with some less than impressive returns. Week 1 versus Hawaii, as their starting quarterback served a suspension, the Huskies managed just 17 points, punting on 8 of 9 second-half possessions. Week 2 against FCS Power Eastern Washington, they allowed 52 points, including a 475-yard, 7-touchdown performance by Eagles quarterback Vernon Adams.
Their quarterback at Eastern Washington had some outstanding throws in that football game. He put it right on the money.
The Huskies were ranked in the preseason top 25 this year, despite key losses at starting quarterback, running back, and tight end. All three either drafted or signing with an NFL team after their college career. New QB Siler Miles made his first start last week after serving a 1-game suspension, and the Illini see similarities between him and former Washington quarterback Keith Price.
Doesn't have obviously the experience the other kid had, but I think he'll only get better as he continues to play.
It sounds simple, but the key for Illinois will be to do what Eastern Washington was able to do. The Huskies are ranked 112th in pass efficiency defense and 114th in passing yards allowed. Need a reminder of what Illinois has done well the first 2 weeks?
Obviously referring to the passing game going well for Illinois. It seems like an intriguing matchup for this offense versus that defense, which has really struggled.
It doesn't look like Washington can stop the pass. It doesn't appear that Illinois is as good at stopping the run. Washington, as we talked about earlier, I don't think is as good running the football as they were last year.
No.
But they have been pretty effective. They seem to have some bodies back there to tote the old rock.
Yeah, they do. The depth at the running back spot is a concern for Illinois just because they can wear down the defense, and they present multiple running styles as well. And Chris Peterson's resume speaks for itself, 94-12 going into this game. But I think it's a ripe time for Illinois to play Washington under Peterson's tenure. You don't want to get him maybe year 3, year 4 when he's at Washington, but right now the players are still kind of trying to grasp the offense, the system, just the routine that a new coach brings into a program, and Illinois got a chance to possibly pull out a win there.
And for a little background for people who don't know, I talk about being from Seattle, but I did spend 3 years in Boise covering that Boise State football team under Chris Peterson when he had Kellen Moore. Kellen Moore won 50 games in his career at Boise State. Everything went right. The culture was good. And in fact, just this week, Peterson said he took that a little bit for granted when he was at Boise State. He has had some behavioral problems. Their quarterback was suspended for week 1. Their cornerback, All-American caliber cornerback, is suspended for this week because he headbutted an Eastern Washington player. That was Peterson's decision. It seems like he's doing a lot of, controlling issues as opposed to coaching football at this point.
Chris Peterson, as Matt mentioned, only 12 losses as the head coach,
Right.
but 2 of those came in the stadium that the game is being played
Right.
today, correct?
Right.
Yeah.
The last one last year, opening the season last year, they lost at Washington. But in terms of that, they did come in as a number 25 team in the preseason. I don't know if that was a little confusing considering they did lose Price, Keith Price, their quarterback. Bishop Sankey was the first NFL running back off the board in the draft this year. How well do you think this Washington team can actually move on Illinois?
Good question. I think they'll be able to move the ball. The other 2 teams Illinois played were able to move the ball. What I'm real concerned about or anxious to see is can they stop Illinois' passing game? And Big Ten and Illinois specifically have not had a lot of luck going west. So I know Matt's ready to pick an Illinois win, or he did pick an Illinois win this morning. I'm not so sure going out there on the road where Washington is 58-13 since 1981 in non-conference games, so we'll see.
I was talking to you, Steve, about picking an Illinois win, and now that I probably did that. Washington's going to probably win like 59-13, and then you mentioned to me that they're 58-13 at the venue. So I think it's just going to be a shootout. Illinois is going to have to win, some high-scoring games this season, and I think Wes Lunt is capable of putting up big numbers. What you need to see from him is just his consistency throughout. You can't have a down quarter against a Pac-12 team and expect to come out with a win.
Coach Beckman mentioned it's 25 years, only 4 teams have started 3-0 for the Illinois football program. This would be a big one. They need a win like this. Well, that does it for us here on Inside the Illini Big Ten Football. The game kicks at 1 p.m. Pacific, 3 o'clock Central. Be sure to catch coverage of today's game tonight here on WAND, on the radio, and in the newspaper and the News Gazette. That does it for us. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for watching Inside the Illini Big Ten College Football. Brought to you by Illini HQ, the News Gazette, News Talk 1400 WDWS, and WAND.